Welcome to MissouriNet.com. I'm Bill Pollack. Glad you're with us again as we talk with Jason West, the communications director from MSHSAA, with our weekly visit. Jason, we are into the winter sports season. Basketball is kicking into high gear. So are all the other winter sports. There's music activities, a busy weekend for that. So what have you guys been up to?
Well, after we caught our breath from the fall championship run, we've started in, like you said, basketball season has started. Had the Norm Stewart Classic here in Columbia over the weekend and had some great games with that people were able to see. And I think they had some pretty good crowds out for teams all over the state, from Republic to Kirkwood to St. Louis teams to Columbia teams. So that had a great following for that. Wrestling has also picked up with some tournaments and duels going on, and that's in full force now too. And then we also are starting to prepare for the music festival, which is in April, but we also have district competition coming up here towards the end of January and in February.
And for those of you that do not know this, the music festival is the biggest in terms of participation, the biggest thing that MSHSAA covers. How many students are involved in that every year?
Just at the city festival itself, we'll have every bit of 10,000 students on campus for those 3 days. So it's a nonstop joyride for most, if you will. For some, not as joyous, but yeah, we'll have every bit of 10,000 students on campus for that.
And you were talking about the Norm Stewart Classic, 3 days of basketball, and that all goes to raise money for Coaches versus Cancer, which Norm Stewart has been involved in for a number of years. And I think even this year they had some ESPN online coverage as well, so some national coverage of that basketball event.
Yeah, I believe that they were broadcasting that on ESPN3.
Yeah, that's great stuff. I mean, that tournament is, and it certainly shows off our kids and our great student athletes across this state as well. So we're talking with Jason West of MSHSAA, and it's brought to you by the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services, reminding you to protect yourself and those around you getting your flu vaccine. That's your best defense against the flu. Stay in the game, get vaccinated, and help tackle the flu. To find a clinic near you, go to mo.gov and click on the flu vaccine locator. All right, I want to talk, Jason, we were talking about the fall sports that were wrapping up and the Show Me Bowl championships at the Dome in St. Louis. You guys had another great turnout, some great games again. And I wanted to talk to you about and ask you how closely you're following the Rams situation with Stan Kroenke wanting to build a stadium in L.A. Are they going to move to L.A.? Are they going to take the team away? Are they going to build a new stadium at the North Riverfront? With your games being there at the Dome, how does this affect you guys, and what do you look at, and what are you keeping an eye out for?
Well, and one thing that many people don't know is our agreement with the Jones Dome is a year-by-year agreement anyway. Unlike many of our other venues that are, we like to do multi-year agreements, that one has to be a year-by-year just because of scheduling and predominantly the Rams schedule, and we won't know until after the NFL schedule is released if we're able to have the Dome like we have. We've been able and been very fortunate to work around the Rams schedule if they have been able to have weekend games, but in the off chance they ever get that Thanksgiving Day game, then we're going to our agreement and our games could be in jeopardy there. That being said, for about the last year and a half, our staff has been in communication with not just the Rams, but also the CVB in St. Louis and the Sports Commission. The city is obviously the owner of the Dome, and so we've been in contact with them as much as possible, even back when they were trying to negotiate the who pays for what and renovations and all of those things, and then what ultimately led to the decision of wanting to build their own stadium. So we're in constant contact, as constant as that can be, with those entities to find out what the current situation is. We're being told that even if the Rams do leave, that they will still maintain the field and want it to be a football venue, then we have to answer the question, okay, well, how safe is that going to be? You're going to keep the turf up, but it still needs to be tested each year, like it is now with the NFL and our games in there. So once we get the major question of, is it still going to be there? Is it still an option? Then there's the secondary questions of how safe is it going to be, and how well are you going to maintain it just for 2 days of football?
So if it comes back, and I think what we've heard is the vote is going to be in January, that the NFL owners will decide what they're going to do. So let's say that, and even if the Rams stay, they're going to get a new stadium. And so at some point, the dome would become, useless for them. What are your backup plans? How do you consider next steps, alternate sites? And have you looked that far down the road, or do you have to look at that in case NFL scheduling throws a wrench in your plans?
We always have to keep that in the back of our minds. Luckily, the schedules are released early enough that if changes do need to be made, then we should have time to be able to make those changes and find a suitable venue to be able to host all of those games. Ultimately, what we'd like to do is wherever the games are played, we'd like to still have all 7 of them at the same site like we do now. Depending on some things, if we have to move games, one plan could be having the 8-man and the Class 6 game on the weekend before, since they have a weekend off to prepare for the dome. And then that game could either be closer to Northwest Missouri for the 8-man crew or in a different venue altogether. But ultimately, we'd like to stick with the same plan that we have now, with all 7 games being at the same venue. If the dome is not an option, or if the Rams leave and we don't feel the dome would be a safe location, we would, in all likelihood, put an RFP out like we have with the other championships and the other venues, and seek proposals from any other venues that may be available and would like to host those games.
And if St. Louis ever did fall through, you guys wouldn't have any issues at all finding another venue, would you? Still a lot of interest?
We would hope there is. Mike Alden always, about every other year, would come to us and would love to have the games at Faurot Field. And we said, once you put a roof on it, we'll think about it. We may not be able to use that for much longer. That may not be an option to use. But we have had some interest from other entities, other colleges. A lot of improvements have been made across the state. William Jewell, Missouri Southern, Missouri State, and Springfield are just a few of the places. Lindenwood in St. Louis has also made a lot of improvements to theirs. So like with many of the other venues we've found, with the improvements that colleges and even the larger high schools are making, there's more venues out there that could be used if they're available.
Yeah, and I would think, just on a side note, and you don't have to comment on this at all, but I would think that this would almost take Mizzou out of it now, since they play Arkansas every other year on that Friday too, so that throws another wrench into it. But yeah, a lot of college football programs with some nice venues across the state too. So, well, interesting stuff. Hey, this is all brought to you by the Missouri NEA. If there was a teacher, coach, or school employee that affected your life in a positive way, they want to hear your story at teacherwordsmatter.org for a chance for you to win $500 for telling your story. They just gave away 10 prizes at the end of the football season, and they'll do it again this basketball season. So it's running through the spring. Jason, anything else coming up this week we need to cover?
I think right now we're status quo. We do have a couple of meetings coming up probably once we get back from Christmas, some regional meetings and things like that. Winter athletic director national meeting, National Organization for Athletic Directors is hosting their summer meeting here in a few weeks. I'm sorry, not summer meeting, but winter meeting here in a couple of weeks. And so we'll prepare for that and then hit the ground running once Christmas break is over.
All right, sounds good. We're off to another busy week of high school sports. Jason, thanks so much for your time.
No problem. Thanks a lot, Bill.
Yep. And thanks for watching us at MissouriNet.com.